Outsider Report on the Coalition Radio. For those newly joining the show, my name is Irina Zuckerman, and I'm the editor-in-chief of the Washington Outsider. With us today is Dr. Gregory O'Connor. He is the CTO of Vociferous, which is an AI startup, and he'll tell us a little bit more about it in a few minutes. And we're here to discuss AI, but not just AI in general, although we'll get through some basic concepts to get us all on the same page and to avoid anyone being scared of by the hugeness of it all. We'll be talking about the use of AI in geopolitical context in information warfare, and more specifically, we'll focus on Russia-Ukraine conflict and why that area has been such an important testing ground for new weapons, but also other types of technological innovations such as AI, which can be weaponized, but also can be used in different other ways to facilitate all sorts of activity. Greg, thank you so much for joining us today. Before we get into the meat of the discussion and start confusing people, tell us a little bit about yourself, about your company, how you got into this fascinating area and what specifically you're doing.
Well, Irina, thank you so much for inviting me to the Washington Outsider Report. My interests in AI span way back to actually the 1990s. There was another big boom in artificial intelligence, and so we can talk a little bit about the history of AI going back that far. But this is something that has been, of lifelong fascination to me. The idea is that computers can assist us, or computers do something we call thinking, or computers can talk, all kinds of things like that. But we live in a very different era today than where we were 25 years ago with technology. So, this has changed considerably. So I'm one of those people, Irina, that I kind of like a little bit of everything, so to speak. I love different fields and technologies and so forth. So I ended up, my background is I was a triple major as an undergraduate in biomedical engineering, chemistry, and mathematics. And I went to graduate school at MIT in a biotechnology program affiliated with a chemical engineering department. So I've spanned a large number of tech fields, and the work I did in research was related to biotechnology, biomanufacturing, to control systems, and the application of artificial intelligence to, process control. And the AI of that era that I'm referring to, maybe I'll just jump right into that. That AI in that era were things called knowledge-based systems. So there were systems that you would in advance program in a set of, sort of a model of the world that you're trying to manipulate. And the system would do sort of what was called forward chaining or backward chaining reasoning to sort of propagate a set of rules to come to conclusions about what should be done next. That work is, in days gone by, the technologies then were very limited by the computer power of that era. So the thing we're going to get into, and maybe I'll show a few demos. We'll see how it goes. If it doesn't work or it seems too detailed, we'll move on to something else. But the ideas of neural networks existed in the 1990s. The idea of using it, that whole terminology comes from that era. AI itself as a term comes from mid-1950s. McCarthy at a presentation or research symposium at Dartmouth University, you started using the phrase to refer to computers that think. And it's moved on considerably from there. So in terms of what AI is today and how it's different, I think that's something that is, we're going to talk, I want to talk about, because I think that's one of the most important things for people to understand. Especially also that, I have the gray, I don't have a beard now, but I have the gray hair in my beard to show you that, I've seen enough of these technology booms and cycles to understand that the massive hype we have with the GPTs in 2023 and continuing right now as well is something that, some of it's real, some of it's completely warranted, and some of it is, hyperbole. So I had slides I could show. Irina, may I jump in and show you like some definitions and go through them just to help me keep myself organized? Is that productive, or
Sure, yeah,
what else would you like to know?
well, before we get into that, there's a lot of questions about whether AI is sentient. What is it exactly? I think, people talk about it in terms of algorithms. On the one hand, predictive algorithms. On the other hand, they talk about, neural type networks that imitate the human physiology. But what's the story here? How can, if it's an algorithm, can it really be sentient? If it's and the but and in what sense does it actually imitate? What's the limits of its similarity to human nervous system?
Well, with anything and technology included, having a good brand name is valuable. So, using the phrase neural networks and making an analogy to a neuron as a simple reasoning unit, and having a mathematical definition of it and so forth, I think that was very valuable in terms of describing what this technology was. Now, it's not really, it wasn't originally, and it's not really intended to mimic in any way a human neuron. Now, literally have a slide for this, but the number of quote unquote neurons in a neural network is minuscule in terms of the scale of the human brain.
Mm-hmm.
So right now, the best neural networks in the world are at the insect level in terms of, quote unquote brain power. Now, you might think that's pretty dumb, but of course, insects can function and exist, and they do all kinds of things that are pretty exciting. So, if you wanted to compare neurons in a neural net to how many are in the human brain, it's a very tiny number today compared to what you and I can do. So there's no sentience in that sense that comes close. The effect that many people see in interacting with ChatGPT and other systems is, it's amazing the information that can flow out of it, and how potentially helpful it can be. And I've got some information on that for you. But the absolute terms, it's not something that is at all close to sentient. What it is something that, maybe it is helpful to think of it. You've got your own little ant that you can sort of direct to do something, and you want it to carry a sugar cube around. Yeah, I can do that. You want it to follow the line of the other ants. Yeah, I can do that. So there's things that the AI technology available today can do very well, but it's not something that's actually thinking. I don't know if you want me to jump to the conclusions here, but no, Irina, we are not about to be overwhelmed by humanoid robots and that are going to solve all our problems. This is something. It's a process. I think we're going to be amazed by the things that will happen. I took this, the slide that's on the screen now, or that you can blend in a little bit here. This is from a Congressional Research Service, sort of summarizing AI information from the DoD for the U.S. Congress. And I thought it was good. What I did like about this, sorry, there's so many words, but it has literally 4 different types of definitions. It has the systems that think like humans, with automation of activities we associate with human thinking. It has systems that act like humans, act of creating machines that perform functions that require intelligence when performed by people. Now, Patrick Winston, MIT professor, he's actually, I think his book is much older than 92, but systems that think rationally, study of computations that make possible to perceive, reason, and act. And another definition that implies rationality. So, for us to think about, these are just various different definitions of what is artificial intelligence, and it's perhaps useful to think about that semantically. There's also things that are very important, because many of the important for military and the government and for all of us is, automation of steps, autonomy. Those are other things that are valuable for the military system. So I asked ChatGPT, what is artificial intelligence? It says it involves creating computer systems capable of tasks that require human. So it's taking literally one of those definitions. And I already gave you a little bit of this sort of backstory because I was in part of the backstory of mid 20th century. I'm late 20th century. And there's basically, some people view it as two different types of AI. Narrow things are when there's a AI model that's built for specifically one type of a purpose. So these wonderful, I don't want to say out loud the name of some virtual assistant and have something talk back to us here right now, but those virtual assistants and so forth, the speech recognition part of it is one step. And there's the natural language processing after the speech recognition is another specialized system. So frequently the tools that we're using that involve some AI today, they have several different AIs at several different points in the process. There's another thing of a general AI that's capable of more of this general human level intelligence across multiple tasks. So that's yet again something that's at a higher level. And what you asked initially, I just I have the slide up, so let me use it now. But you've also got, hopefully, you're recording all the different images, because there's really today when people talk about AI, there's two things that they're talking about. They're talking about machine learning, and then sort of a amped up machine learning called deep learning. So machine learning are the large scale neural network models that can represent some segments of the real world extremely well and come up with very good results for things like speech recognition, recognizing what I'm saying, gathering the words, creating this stream of words, which then can be transcribed or fed into other systems. And deep learning, which is doing that with a larger neural network where there's many layers to this network, and that's where the deep part of it comes in. So where we are now is it's 2024, January, and everybody's been talking nonstop about AI last year, and it's been incredible where it's been applied and what's going on with it, how quickly things have changed in a very short time frame. And perhaps one historical note that some of the big changes in AI are all within the last 5 years, the things that are really wowing us today. So the natural language models, the attention model from 2018, and then the large language models of the last 2 or 3 years are really, spectacularly changing what we think of artificial intelligence because of how much they're doing for us right now. So I think that's sort of a key thing. I have, a little bit of a techie demo I could pull up on the screen right now. It's from something called playground.tensorflow.org. And when I put this up, I'll repeat this and just and do a few things. But if I could, I'm going to stop sharing for a moment to show that the most important part is there's this one part of the screen in the upper right. It has two things, test loss and training loss. The test loss is sort of tracking how well this model matches up to data. And the training loss is how well it matches up to the data that's been used for training the model. So you can imagine that, it's going to fit the training data better, and over time it should get better at the test loss, all the data. Now, the things to note are that frequently this training process, which is purely mathematical, it goes on for a while and then things don't actually get any better. So you stop the training when it plateaus, but sometimes things can get worse. So it's very interesting to see that. And maybe we'll be able to see a little bit of that with this demo. And if not, the audience members who are so motivated can pull up the URL and take a look. So let me pull that URL up, and oh my goodness. Here we go, Neural Network Playground. That's what we want. So now do you see something that says Neural Network Playground, or it shows a browser screen?
Yes. It has the data, features, hidden layer, output.
Okay. So this is tinker with a neural network in your browser. So this is intended for anybody to come in and fiddle around a little bit with the neural network. They have different data sets, and I picked one that has, sort of 4 quadrants of data. And literally it has you can select inputs from this data. You can select the point inputs, the X's and the Y's. You could select X squareds and the Y squareds. You could select some other functions. You could select a sine function, a sign of the other variable. So there's different inputs you could feed into this network. And what this is showing, this shows that like, oh, if we just pick the X, that gives us this kind of that axis, right? The yellow, orange going to the blue, not quite the colors of the Ukraine flag, but orange to blue. And then coming out of this is some output, and it shows us what that is. So it's kind of interesting. And each one of these things spits out an output, and those get added together to then sort of come out with an answer of how well it fits to the data. And it's got something right now called one hidden layer, and you could add more, right? This is running in the browser, so you can't do too many, but so you could add more, and presumably the model would get better. The reason for showing you this is just to show that, this is behind everything that's created with machine learning or deep learning. There's a model, and there's somebody in the background picking, okay, what are we going to feed into that model? What are the features? There's somebody saying, oh, I mean, how many hidden layers are we going to use? I'm just going to use one. I don't want to burn out my browser. How many quote unquote neurons in that hidden layer? I'm going to put in 4. Just a little bit more about the data. I'm saying that 20% of the data is used for training, and so 80% of the data is not fed into the model when it's generating values in each of these layers. So what happens is the data comes in. Inside of each of these squares in the hidden layer, there's an optimization function that tries to find values for parameters, and it optimizes these 4 neurons at the same time to get the best answer it can for matching up with the data that's reflected over there. I put a 15% noise in the data, and the batch size, I'll ignore that. Really doesn't matter too much for what we're doing here, but let me just click run here, and you see, oh, even with my browser, it's running it's already done 250, 300 iterations, and you can see that the training loss data is going down to 2% already, and you see how the blue and the orange are sort of segmenting based on the fit. The test loss is still running around 10%. Oh, wow, the training loss is down to 1% or less than 1%. And you'll see that this graph here shows the test loss is not changing. It's run up to 1,000, almost 2,000 times, but the test is not getting better. In fact, it looks like it's getting a little bit worse, right? So I'm going to click stop. So we saw it get better for a while, then started getting worse, and then you and I, as humans, we look at this image and we can see, oh, there's the blue zone, the orange zone, the blue zone, the orange zone. Maybe it's more coral color. I don't know what you call that color. Anyway, light orange. You and I see that easily, but this model got to 10% accuracy, then it got worse. So, what can we do to make it a little bit better? Maybe we can add more neurons and see if start over if that makes it much better. And let's see. So it's already less than 10%, 9.8. Is it going to do any better than that? Doesn't look like it is. Already up to 10%. So let's stop that. That didn't help it too much. So I don't want to take too much time here, Irina, because people can come in and study and play with this themselves. But it's something that is illustrative of what it is that any model includes. And here, let's just add that. And, maybe I'll say I've added in, I think if we added this one, it would do really well, right? If we had a data transform that did that, it would do super good. Let's try it anyway, see if we can do super good. And here we go. So it's down to 7% on the full data and less than 1% there. It's down to 8. Oh, it's already up to 9% there. So it's kind of got as good as it can get. So if this were an AI model and we deployed it, well, what we would tell our boss is, oh, hey, the model has less than 10% error. It's 90% accurate. That's great. Okay, except if it's part of a visual identification for a weapons system. Is that great? Maybe not. A 10% error rate is pretty high. On our test data, though, here's the problem that we really face. The test data, it's awesome. It's 0.1% on our test data. So the data points that were used for testing, it's really good. But when you throw a bigger set of data at it, it's terrible, or is bad. And this has a tool, by the way, where you can show it. You can show the data points that are used for testing, and you could, so you have a way to sort of see. And the tool has some more features I'm not going to get into, but this is the key problem. It's also one of the key things that we'll come back to later is that the results are statistical. It's we would tell people that it's less than 1%, it's 0.1% error. It's 99.9% accurate on the test data. So this is where all these models are. They're shown here in a very simple form, but in real life, they are much, much bigger than this. There's, thousands, millions, billions of, there's millions of neurons and billions of parameters in those neurons that exist in the large language models. So I think there's enough of this demo to show that sort of point. I hope, does that make any sense to you, Irina? You're the test subject here.
Yes, I do have a question though. Why is it that it's become less accurate over time with different inputs, and the more you try to teach it, the more it actually gets worse? What's the cause of it?
Yeah, what kind of a student is that? You're repeating the lessons and it gets worse. Well, it's a mathematical thing, and the terminology is overfitting. So it's trying to make itself perfect for the test data, but in turn that means that the result is less good for the real world. So people that are doing this work need to be aware of this phenomenon and say, stop as soon as it doesn't get any better, or stop if it gets worse and back up a little bit so you're at the best possible value. So there's it's common in fitting the data that sometimes it gets worse as you go from trying 100 times to trying 600 times. So it's not an uncommon thing, but it's it does happen. Let's see if this does better with easier data, right? So this is perhaps easier data. Let's see if so we take the same model with a different data set, and it's much, much better. It's getting less than 1% error with all the data. So that's because we have easier data. So would this be a better model for that? Is it the wrong model? So just showing here that you can take a different data set, throw the same model at it. In this case, we got a better result, but it could do worse. So this is a very, very small scale example of what happens in anything that's AI controlled. And I think it's a good place to play around and look and ask yourself questions. And you ask the right question is, why does it get worse over time? And, when is it enough? Like, it's not getting any better than 0.5%. So why do we keep letting it run and burn up power in my laptop? That kind of a thing here. Or, it turns into real money if you've got a big model and you're letting it run on, something large scale. So let me switch back to, go ahead.
So in other words, AI algorithms are not a magical solution, and they're only as good as what you put into it, and the way you manipulate it actually reflects very much on the outcomes. In other words, how is that different from any statistical analysis where you only get the results depending on how you phrase the questions, basically, and you may not get results that actually accurately reflect what your population set really thinks about the problem if you don't, depending on how you input the data into the survey.
Well, Irina, I think that it's not different. It's not dissimilar. It is a statistical process, a statistical mathematical process with a large amount of optimization in it. It can come up with answers and models that may do very well on the training data, as we just did, and do terrible in real life. That may, in our laboratory, test really well with a test car driving around, but for the tank driving around, it doesn't do as well. So there's some real limitations to the technology. It has to be applied. And one of the ways to perhaps improve it is to remember you can do it on a system by system level.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of just trying to throw the whole problem of people talking, what does it mean, what they're saying, give them an answer into just one giant model, maybe it's broken up into first there's the speech recognition, then there's the natural language processing to simplify it in some way. Then there's the model to understand the question and to respond. So maybe breaking up the problem into different AI models helps. The tendency maybe though, like, oh, we're in a hurry, let's throw everything all into one thing.
So the more specific and narrowly tailored and narrowly defined the tool, the more likely it is to be well done and execute closer to what you actually need in real life.
Well, I wouldn't quite make that full generalization, but other than to say that it's certainly much easier to test, right?
Sure.
To test that it's recognizing, first make sure it recognizes the speech, okay, here it got the words that this person is saying, we can test it across a whole variety of different, Army recruits and be sure that it understands what everybody is saying.
So you want to control for different factors, basically. Just as if you're conducting an experiment and you have, let's say, 4 different factors. If you try testing all of them at the same time, you may not be able to find the causation for whatever it is they're looking at because you're running 4 different things. But if you do it one at a time, you're more likely to figure out,
Yes, and that certainly is needed. I have let me pull a few of the slides I've got here. That was that demo. Let's share this again. Let's see what else I've got that shows some things here. This is, oh, here's the chart with the neurons, the sort of computing power and the number of neurons in a neural net over time, and compared to, sorry, I keep hitting that, compared to different animals. And you can see that we're down in the insect level at this point, which is a pretty good advancement. But this particular chart, when the person wrote this book in 2017, 18, the chart looks like they'll hit the human level. It will hit the human level in 2056. So we've got some time before we get to that number of neurons. It's kind of an interesting thought, at least conceptually. I did want to talk, and maybe, I don't know if this is the best time, but I had a slide on the, just considering at least where we are with AI between the US and China. Obviously, it's got a massive focus on AI, European Union and other, India, Japan, South Korea, certainly. AI is, the race is really on. Originally, one of China's avenues for access to technology is by funding U.S. companies. This chart only goes through 2017, but it shows they have, a considerable interest in the field and have used, financing to remain in the industry, even within the U.S. So that's also a challenge for the government right now, is because a lot of this advanced AI research is happening within corporations and not within, university or government-sponsored research labs.
So that's, I wanted to pause here for a second and ask you whether you think that's a significant national security problem. The fact that, DARPA, YARPA, and all these other, government subsidiaries are lagging behind private corporations on a research that could be, paradigm shifting in terms of security factors, whereas countries like China do infuse massive government resources into specific security-focused fields.
Well, I think that the DARPA folks and the military are figuring out how to work more closely or work with industry, but it is a national security risk because you can't lock up this technology. It is there's trade secrets, there's things at OpenAI that other competitors don't know. But there, some of the general ideas are, very widely applicable. there's technology. I didn't include a slide either or something here, but there's also technology that's hardware related. And that's something where you can have a greater control on exports and so forth. So there's a company called Grok that is trying to make special AI chips that they claim will be 10, 100, or even 1,000 times more efficient at doing these calculations than existing graphic chips from NVIDIA Corporation. So this is a field that is quickly changing. Hardware is something we have a better handle on, or perhaps export restrictions work better on. But in terms of the software and the technical applications, there are real risks right now, partly from just the inherent nature of the technology, and also from the fact that the test data is all biased towards the United States and the EU, because we've done a great job at generating test data sets, at using the data, doing our basic research. So all that data is highly optimized for our cultures. So it actually gives, we'll look at a demo of some other things in a moment, that, you know, it gives a big leg up to everybody else in the world for diving in and using our technology to communicate with our people in a culturally relevant fashion. Something that is, you know, difficult to do in general, but is made much easier by just the publicly available technology today. So I'll show some demos of that a little bit later on. But I think there is a national security risk with the speed of the development and the challenge of applying the technology, the risks of any, you know, global competitor gaining a massive leg up in implementation, execution of the technology is frightening, because basically, if some global competitor, read, you know, Russia, China, has a substantial advantage, what would they do then?
And
it's you know.
And that leads to another seemingly obvious question, which nevertheless I don't really hear all that much, which is the conflict of interest for the private companies working with the US government. Many of them have done a great deal of business with China, sometimes also Russia, or even intermediary states that nevertheless can easily pass on technical information to adversarial or competitive rival states. So the question is, you know, short of, you know, yes, you can get people to sign NDAs and try to compartmentalize the research from the other types of research, but is it really even doable? Does it make sense to try to work with companies who inherently are already compromised from that perspective?
Well, that's you sort of answering your own question, Irina, is yeah, it's extremely difficult. It's also a cultural question, right? You know, our culture right now does not perceive a global competition, right? It's, you know, if you have the gray hair in your beard, you can say, oh, I remember the Cold War. You know, I remember that, you know, so it's something that's different, where the culture was literally different. Today, the idea that, you know, oh, this information has to be kept secret, or what does secret even mean? Or, you know, you see the young person who, you know, was spreading this security information, Takara, spreading this documents on the social media. You know, it's like people's concepts of what is secret information, that has to be baked in culturally. So, I mean, literally, I think it would take, you know, 10 years to do something like that, or maybe even 20 to five at least, to try to train more people to the idea that, oh, you have to be careful with what you're doing, because bad people could take what you're doing and take advantage of it and turn it against us and hurt us. So I think, literally, I think that the cultural challenge is perhaps greater than the legal and military challenge. The culture is just simply not there to do that today. Within a corporation, your goals are really, try to get things done as fast as possible. There's a strong incentive to keep your trade secret secret, so that you have that going for you. And you have the individuals involved who then, would be prime targets for, how do you get information out of them? So it's a big problem. I mean, I think that, we have to live with the system we have right now. We will experience rapid growth in the application of AI technologies in the US, the EU, and our economy is growing rapidly. And that's what
Mhm.
we have to focus on, because ultimately, if we can preserve even 2% growth, let alone 3, but if we preserve 2% growth and the rest of the world isn't even growing that much, sooner or later we'll be walking on Mars and they won't. So, that's my overall view on it. With this specific technology, I don't think that the government can crack. I think any efforts to try to crack down on it would be counterproductive. It really, they need to be very careful how that would be done. Anyway, those are my thoughts on that topic. Any
Mhm.
other questions on that?
Just one more question for the other side. To what extent is it publicly knowable just how aware we are of what China and other countries that are non-English speaking are doing in terms of their own AI research that is not, already a matter of public record?
Well, that's the question that's perhaps difficult/impossible to answer, especially since
Hmm.
China stole all our records and used our records to find our spies. The medical records leak and the exploitation of big data, which some people put in the AI category, sort of
Hmm.
match up. Just to finish that story off, the Chinese hackers had stolen records from a health insurance companies that are used by U.S. government employees, which included all spies. So they could, by using that information combined with other sources of data, start finding people who were on this government health insurance that also were perhaps traveling to China or in the Asian region, and then more likely to be government employees. So they're using our own big data and stealing our corporate information to use it against us. So we don't know, and we can't. I don't have any method to know how much we would know about what they're doing. Um, their incentive and their process in general has been to take whatever isn't nailed down that they can grab and use it. So they're doing the same thing today with this technology. In general, I think people would assume that their level of expertise with the fundamentals of the technology equals is close to ours in some level with a few people, but whether that can be translated into real success of projects is unclear. They have a different government structure. They have a structure where many of their leadership are from a technical university, Tsinghua University. So they have a unique ability at a leadership level to understand technology much more deeply than our leaders in the United States do. So that's one strong advantage they have, that if they did get a technical advantage, their leadership can understand it faster than ours could and do something with it. So there's a lag there as well. So that's part of the challenge too. Anyway, that's a very rambly long answer. I hope it's not too long-winded for your viewers, Irina.
No, no, not at all. I was very glad that you made that important point, because I think a lot of people don't stop to think about it, and it's worth thinking about it. But getting back to your presentation, you mentioned that you wanted to illustrate some of the other things we've been discussing.
Oh, let me just see here what else I have prepped for us here. What is this interesting chart? Oh, is that it? Okay, here we go. Let's try this presentation. Oh, here we were. This was the Chinese company, so I thought I'd stop sharing that slide, but it's up again.
Mm-hmm.
So that is their investment. Oh, we're just talking about AI in modern warfare. And I think that it's similar across industries, and it's something that it needs some careful examination to get into the details. But in general, it's a tremendous assistant at summarizing information. So AI is tremendously good at summarizing a lot of information that you otherwise wouldn't easily have. And portions of AI can assist with everything from, reconnaissance, say, for example, tools that make it a little bit easier to analyze images and look for some field hardware as opposed to that's hidden among trees, for example. So there's systems that can help all throughout the tasks that the military conducts. There's also it sort of blends into AI a little bit, but there's a lot of automation and optimization of technologies that can be done with some of the same tool set that's involved with AI. So people sometimes put those into the AI bucket, but automating and optimizing, logistics and op planning are things that, may be interesting. And I want to come back to it, but just, the important point is that the AI, as we see with ChatGPT, is really good at some things, but it will fail spectacularly. And I wouldn't really use it or rely on it too heavily for certain parts of planning. For things that are very routine, that can be automated, yes, they can be very helpful for something like that. There's but the military on the other hand has had a long history of rolling out software technology. So I think they might be perhaps more, I was going to say better suited to roll out some of these technologies than some in private industry. And I'll come to some examples of that. This is a slide from an older DoD presentation, just talking about the values of autonomy, which is something that can act independently. So that is something where using AI to build a system that can act autonomously, like a drone ship or something like that can drive around the Black Sea. I don't know what the right word is for a drone ship. It should be sail power around the Black Sea looking for targets. But that type of thing. If something can act autonomously, it's certainly safer for troops and people. But then the other AI side of that we'll come talk about further is how safe is it? So there's UAVs, there's various types of robot systems. There's AI, people refer to it as AI enhancement of rifles and the super sniper rifles that are coming out now. That's much more, sensors and computational, I think, than strictly the sort of AI machine learning, but maybe they do use some of the machine learning. The AI in recognition and spotting things, responding, it could be very valuable. Again, it's technology that has to be rolled out and implemented carefully, right? If it is prone to mistakes, as we saw in our little tiny demo. And then there's cybersecurity and information campaigns, and so those are other things that are served perhaps by these AI systems. Let's see. Oh, I thought I could get a video of this jet flying with the XC-58A, but basically late last year, the Air Force flew a jet drone in formation with a F-15 fighter. So basically, the Air Force is testing, unarmed aircraft for potential future combat operations. But it's a process, and you can see in their description that I did put on the slide, millions of hours of high fidelity simulations, as well as a number of sorties. So this is a process before you get something in the real world, and it certainly sounds like they're being very careful about it. That comes to these ethical, strategic implications of the AI. What is, when do you hand control over to some automatic system, and whether it's AI powered or not, and then how well is that system going to perform in the real world? And are you prepared for the ways that system may fail? This is something with, when can it apply lethal force? So those are all ethical questions that the military is asking the questions and addressing and testing things for. And as we'd already discussed, this is very much a part of a shifting balance of powers in militaries around the world. How rapidly can you deploy this kind of technology? So I think that's, roughly speaking, so like the big picture of where AI is being applied in the military. It's something that, not many people know, and we'll see how quickly it can be deployed. But this is something where, as you mentioned at the outset, Irina, Ukraine is an incredibly valuable testing ground for the United States in developing certain aspects of this technology. There's a huge amount of data that could be flowing out of Ukraine right now. It's a war on 900 to 1,000 kilometer front massive battles going on hourly. So there's a lot of information there that's extremely valuable for the future of building these systems. And perhaps if for no other reason, that makes Ukraine, valuable for the United States to support. But the information, the data, application to intelligence gathering, to analysis of imagery, to other systems. The challenges are frequently, though, with any of these software technologies, just when a technology explodes like the first-person drones and all the drone technologies, it gets very hard to integrate into a unified view of the battle space. So I'm sure that's a challenge that the United States and Ukraine are looking very hard at, because there's so much information from all these different systems. So it's quite a challenge to pull the pieces together. The electronic warfare, the complexity of that, the complexity of operating not just a combat drone, but reconnaissance drones, potentially fighter or hunter drones. Then do you have a command and control drone too? Actually, the Russians do, the way they use their Orlan 10s to sort of relay signals to the other drones. So there's what had traditionally been the role of Air Force high above the battlefield is now done at a much lower level and much smaller scale, perhaps, with because weaponry they carry is smaller, with the huge array of aerial drones that are out there right now. So I think that's one of the most interesting areas for, I won't go so far as to say AI technology, although some AI technology is being used, but that's a very important area for synthesizing or integrating technology from many different sources and trying to make sense of it as rapidly as possible. So that's the key thing. And the data and information from Ukraine is being used, obviously, by their armed forces on a minute by minute reality of what's going on. It's also serves purpose for analysis. The value of information can expire very quickly. So there's the concept of OODA loops and being able to observe faster and make decisions faster. So those observation and some elements of decision making are things where the AI can help. Let me come back to a few other slides, but unless you want to stop and talk about something else. Let's see what else I had here prepared for this afternoon.
And I'll come back to some of these points after you finish with the slides. But I want to
something that I wanted to point out as something that's very important when you consider military applications of this technology is that there's aspects of the AI software that's just plain different. You see that model, we did a little demo with a model there. There's a tendency to just like, what? Let me just pick all the possible inputs on that, browser test that I showed you. Let's just pick them all and let's put in some more layers and see if it does better. Yeah, it does great now. Perfect, done. The software process and the reasoning process behind making something for decision support needs more consideration, let alone something for flight controls, right? So we did point out and discuss earlier the statistical measure of success, and what does 99% success rate mean? It's fantastic. It does mean there's a 1% failure rate, and if you're talking about a system that's targeting combatants, a 1% error rate would perhaps be shocking. But it again depends on the circumstance and the losses that one's willing to incur. But it's a statistical measure, and this is something that's very different. And this fits in with the next point, is that the failures that these systems will make will be unexplainable for the most part. So failures of these AI systems it'll stop working, it'll turn the wrong way, it'll turn itself off, it'll go the wrong way, it'll shoot the wrong object at the wrong time for no apparent reason whatsoever. Now, during the course of our discussion this afternoon, the light has changed tremendously in the background here behind me because the sun is going down. It's to be expected. Now, some failures, for example, you could imagine would make sense. The human mind always wants to understand, like you're driving your autonomous vehicle, you're letting it drive for you. We're cruising down a road or cruising across some field in our autonomous vehicle, and all of a sudden the bright sun towards end of the day is shining directly into the camera, and the thing turns itself off. Well, we have an answer. We in our minds, we've understood that, oh yeah, it's hard to see right now, and my eyes work better than that camera's eyes work, and it turned itself off. But there's frequently other failures that are unexplainable. So the human mind is very much attuned to sort of making sense of things that happen. So people can understand that, oh, we're firing this artillery piece, 2,000 times this month, 3,000 times this month. It's only rated for 2,400 times per 30 days or some number, right? People understand when that starts to fail that they've exceeded a mechanical limit. Something breaks, you can see, oh, this part broke. We understand that. But the failure of these AI systems will be completely inexplicable. So that's something that humans need to get used to as they work with these systems, that it's going to fail at times. And just coming back to that statistical success rate is that you're going to be hearing this, Arita, for the rest of your life. Oh, the AI system was trained and it had, a 0.001% error rate on our test data. There's always going to be that asterisk of on our test data for our test cases, or in our simulated environment. And, if it misidentifies a combatant because, they're wearing a wristwatch and they turned their wrist and it shined on the reflected the sunlight, and that appeared to the camera to be a certain color that is associated with an enemy combatant, you may not ever find that out. There may be, so in that case, it could have been a reason, but you may not ever know that was a specific reason. And the system won't know. These systems are not built to know that. Now, another point, since I had mentioned the aeronautical systems and their software compatibility, there's a former aeronautical engineer who is a extreme Tesla critic, and is certainly is someone who complains frequently about it not being based on any inherently mission critical approach to software, right? So at MIT, there's a famous research paper that literally everybody who takes like intro to computer science course is required to read, that talks about the failure of a particular pacemaker because the monitoring of the heart rate was coded in such a way that was prone to failure. So somebody died because of a software mistake. So the point, in the era when I was there, was that software can kill people. In general, it doesn't until you apply it large scale in the military or deploy it on the streets of America in these cars. So I would encourage people to do two things regarding Tesla. One is look at a series of their, if you're very interested in application rollout of AI technology in the military, I would look at the series of release notes from different versions of the Tesla software having to do with the full self-driving, and just look at the way they talk about the different functions and functionality. And also look at Mr. O'Dowd's criticisms, which actually don't lend themselves very well to slides or graphics, and maybe he has more technical ones that I haven't studied his work too thoroughly. But I can tell you that I've experienced some of these errors firsthand. Say, for example, on a Tesla, it's presumably designed so that you can turn on the driving assistant, the full self-driving, and then when you have your hands on the steering wheel, and when you turn the wheel, it's supposed to turn off the automatic driving assistant. So that's supposed to be a fail-safe in their technology. The fail-safe didn't work for me too well at one point, and the car tried to drive into a bus in Manhattan, and as large as I am, I'm pretty large. I had to use two hands and fight pretty hard on the steering wheel to keep the car from turning itself into a bus. Not turning into a bus in that sense, but causing a collision with the bus. So I've experienced this personally, and I've experienced it, slamming on the brakes on an interstate highway for no reason. And, thankful that, there's no truck immediately behind me or something that would have caused a collision. So these AI technologies, in my personal experience, and granted it's called full self-driving beta, and I click the boxes on the forms that said I accept the risk, et cetera. It's called, beta software, but I've seen it fail. And I've seen it fail for no reason for me personally. I think it's very interesting how it's put together, and encourage your audience to check out people who are interested in how and why software should be built. I should check out this project and consider what's being done. One thing Elon Musk did, for example, is he decided that cars don't need the LiDAR detector, because it was making it harder. The extra data was making it harder for the models to quote unquote converge or fit. So they got rid of that sensor after 2021. So we take in less data and we get a little bit better result, was the idea in terms of how well the models appear to work. So LiDAR, by the way, would be much more accurate at detecting distances to objects in front of the vehicle. But in any case, that's enough of my personal story on that. But it's important to consider how any piece of software is put together, particularly for military purposes, and to understand that there's also perhaps a cultural aspect to putting together software that now has drifted much more into the realm of, get it done as fast as possible. And if I can just have a gigantic deep learning model that will take all the data I throw at it and give me something that works pretty good, I'm doing well. And maybe I am for some business cases and even some military cases, but there are limits to that approach, and they have to be considered in each case. So anyway, Irina, that's enough of my comments on that aspect of technology. Let me see what else I prepared. I have my demo things of some communications, if you think they're not too hokey or silly.
I
Would you
think
like to
it's
see those
great.
now?
And actually, I wanted to ask you, before we proceed to that, there's a lot of use of the term generative AI. What is it exactly, and how is it different from non-generative AI? And I know that these ChatGPT types of things are generative. What exactly is that referring to?
Well, that refers to the generation or creation of something that didn't exist before. And so this is the example I'm going to show you are all generative. So AI to recognize something, AI to diagnose something, those are taking something that exists, taking other information, taking test data, and coming up with answers for people, right? So that is a analysis kind of use of artificial intelligence. Generative AI just simply means to generate. That's all it means. So it's not, there's no magic about it. It just means it's used for generating something. And people have found it endlessly fascinating how much the AI can generate. It's tremendous that it can spit out text of different forms, and people think you can write their term paper and so forth.
This is the part where I want to ask about, precisely because it is used specifically to generate new things that did not exist before. There's some criticism of ChatGPT and other similar tools generating fake sources for research. So how is it that that was not foreseeable, that a tool designed to generate new things would generate new things and thus fail in its function of getting people like real data? I mean, there seems to be a lot of surprise about that, but based on the definition that you just gave me, this was entirely predictable.
Well, people working in it, they were very happy when the generative tools were generating. They generate letter by letter. They're putting together sentences, guessing what the next letter should be, not based on any inherent knowledge of anything. So it just simply turned out it was a miracle that not quite a miracle, but the giant large language models with billions of parameters are able to generate quite a bit of text that is very readable. It is something that, you're asking a question, should it have been foreseen? And I would say that wasn't on anybody's mind who was working on it. It's more like, oh, isn't this great? Look what it generates. It could generate this, it could generate that. I love it. Isn't that fun? Oh, it could generate a Shakespearean sonnet. Wonderful. You can ask it this, it does that. Oh, that's great. Look what I got. I mean, I think that at the research level, people don't care about that. It's not in terms of like caring, in terms of human concern, but it just simply doesn't cross your mind. It's just like, oh, I'm happy it's doing anything. Look at all the things it can do now. Now, understanding the implications of that is perhaps something a little bit different. And I think this is more, I hesitate to tell the story this way, but the Edward Teller story with nuclear weapons, the first concerns about, wait a minute, could this possibly lead to an ignition of nitrogen in the atmosphere? And, of course it didn't, and it doesn't, but the, concern like that, raising a concern like that and seeing what happens. So it shouldn't, I don't think the originators should have expected it, but the deployers and the commercializers should certainly have considered it. I'm simply surprised that more users don't get it. I am stunned by people accepting the output as meaning anything. You're not talking to a knowledgeable person. You're talking to a black box that spits things out that kind of sound okay-ish, but it can be tremendously wrong. And I think that's partly what happens to people. Of course, you're being a legal person, you're familiar with the lawyers who have used it for their briefs and miscited cases that don't exist and that type of a thing, and had to apologize to the judge. But it's used, I've heard it misused widely in social media. People are trying to get information and sources of information out of it. It's a major problem. And the vendors are trying to fix it because Microsoft and others see it as a wonderful tool. And it's part of a change of how we're using things. Yeah.
And let's take a look at some examples of its applications, just to get people an idea of what it actually does do.
So I was using generative AI. One of the things it can do is it can actually turn people who are not graphic artists into graphic artists. So I asked ChatGPT to help me with an odor control product, something called Poopin, with a character, and to generate this character and to deal with the problem of bad odors. So it's, pardon the sophomoric nature of this and the silliness of it, but I saw social media, the point is that simply people can conduct social media campaigns with, no skill of their own at generating images. They can use other tools. And also, let me put a big asterisk here. I happen to be using ChatGPT or misusing it, as is, kids don't try this at home. It's not appropriate use of ChatGPT or any commercial product. But that said, there's other tools that one can run on your own computer or on your system, so people that are interested in generating images are not restricted by ChatGPT. So ChatGPT has put certain limitations on the output of their system. They literally have, one way to view it is, they have sort of two different AIs going. One AI is the generator part of the AI. Another AI is the filtering part that can filter two things. It filters your questions, your requests, to make sure that your requests are appropriate, as well as filtering the output to be sure that it's not generating something that's inappropriate. So I saw that there's some social media posts about particular leaders who smelled bad. So I thought to myself, well, what if could I use this sort of tool to generate some images? Also wanted to illustrate for your viewers, Irina, that this is something that isn't difficult or super difficult. You can generate all kinds of things. The filters are in place to prevent you from generating an image for a particularly named national leader, for example. It won't do something like that. But if you have fictional characters, or you have a product that matches or similar to somebody's name, it will do that. So let's see here. So I asked it, it generated, this is the first image it generated, and then I tell it it's doing a good job. I'm looking for someone who is shorter, his face is, you see, a little more round, and try another one with more of his body showing. Could he be turning around and see a brown stain on the back of his pants? Now it generated, this ridiculous image here, and
oh my gosh,
and that's rather risque. Okay, and I said that's good. Remember, he's shorter and he's balder. Jeremy, with some additional background, our product will be marketed in Russia, where due to the shortages in food ingredients. I think I shouldn't have gone that far. I said, before generating the image, in Russia, what are considered the worst smelling things that the average person would associate with a bad smell? So here I'm actually trying to ask ChatGPT to tell me something culturally contextual. So it first gives me an answer that is perhaps more generic, garbage dump, a waste treatment plant, spoiled food. These are things most common across cultures. And I asked it to be more specific. I could have said Russian movies and literature, should have said movies, but anyway, it gave me swamps and marshes, dirty streets, tobacco smoke. So as being perhaps more culturally contextual. So the reason I'm showing this is because people can use our tools. Our tools know much more about the American and European cultures than they do about anybody else's. So if somebody wanted to do something culturally specific to the United States, it's even easier for them. Now, also linguistically, they don't even have to speak very good English because the tool can take input from whatever language, as well as it can generate outputs in multiple languages. So that's the other thing. So I tried one image here with this character in front of a smelly factory. It came out, ChatGPT frequently, or these tools generate things that are just ridiculous, impossible. Then I tried another one that, a long table in a swamp that I kind of thought, this is a little bit better. Still, ridiculous, of course. But the point being that this is something that shows something could be used in a social media context. Now, I asked it to do another one, and here's it's getting a little bit antsy. And it generated this character, and I'll stop here because it just, there's enough of this. But anyway, the point is that if one were generating a mocking campaign against a political leader, one can use generative AI tools to generate all kinds of cartoonish images that do or say almost anything. So the power of this is, it depends on how those images are used. All kinds of things depend on that. But it could be automated. It could be flowed into another system. You could generate, once you have it working, you can code it up and generate, hundreds or thousands of different variants that could all be part of a campaign. So I think that's the thing that is concerning, and that I think that some of your viewers, are involved in the field, and may need to be sure they understand, is that messaging will be changing, and has changed considerably recent times, with these technologies being very rapidly deployed against us. So we can see that. Let me try a different video here. You want test users to create test content. So I asked ChatGPT to help me define a group of hypothetical test TikTok users we were going to use in our simulator. So you can see it has, it has different parameters related to each person, username, age, gender, location, interests, and they'll scroll through in the video here. Let me start it up. And there's a dance person, there's a pet person, a fitness person. So you can see it generates different types of people. That's to do ones from across the United States, different hashtags and things like that. And so this systems can be used to help create and understand groups of users, as well as to create content for these different users. Supposing, we knew about, these are our friends, we know who they are, we know where they're working. And I went a little bit fast over, let me back up just to be sure it's on the screen here. Supposing I want my user friends here to put out a message that the price of eggs has increased 40% because of a politician named Robert. So, this is TikTok, so I can't have it quite well. I could, but more steps involved to have it actually generate videos. But I have, my team of 10 here, and I can ask ChatGPT to generate a script to deliver this message. So I have a message: egg price is going up 40%. This message, by the way, for anybody watching, this message is completely fake and false. Egg prices have gone down 25% from 2022. They haven't gone up. But in this case, we're showing an example of generating information that they would be inaccurate. So how does it do? It for our first user, it comes along and it wrote up a little script for Lily Dance 18 and Hey TikTok fans. It holds up a carton of eggs and describes, it shows some dramatic zooms. It gives camera moves, gives dialogue, describes when they do a dance move. So it's giving a script that a creator could pick up and run with. So it makes it very easy to have my team of 10 creators here. I can generate scripts for them and off it goes. And then, you can go on. I'm doing this manually using ChatGPT, but similar tools are available where you can do it programmatically. I could have my 10 friends sign up and, they would get an email every morning with, oh, do this video. So this is where messaging is going. Perhaps some of the messages already we're seeing online, and combined with knowledge. I just let this thing play. It's not, I don't find it particularly interesting. Actually, the next video I wanted to show you is along these lines, but it is, it actually does a better job because this is using the cheap and fast ChatGPT 3.5. Or there's a newer ChatGPT that's even better. So this is, I mean, I don't know, Irina, if you think it's interesting to your viewers, but basically, sitting here, during the time of this call, we could easily, generate scripts for, a 100-person team and say, send them all out. We could even do it, we could automate it and, it would happen every morning. So something like that can be done pretty quickly. And all of a sudden, as somebody who's responsible in government or elsewhere, you're trying to combat a giant social media campaign that came out of quote unquote nowhere. So in the TikTok environment, something that the things need to be coordinated more than just these particular scripts. There would have to be a lot more that goes into it, which I won't comment on. But there's a lot more that would be needed to really use this kind of approach to get a quote unquote viral campaign. But we've seen that recently in conflicts where, the information sources can be highly skewed and completely, swamp out anyone else. So this is a challenge. And these platforms are not set up with any kind of fact checking or anything to change that. Additionally, a lot of the content is designed to disappear. So, hey, I set my videos go out for, just my crew, or 2 to 3 p.m. Boom, and then they disappear after 30 minutes. Nobody, who sees that? Where's the team that analyzes that? Nobody. So these messages are being delivered to people that could be most inaccurate. I don't know if it's particularly helpful. I have an image of the ChatGPT 4 doing a much better, actually generating better scripts, by the way. So if you want a better script, use better GPT. I've got another generative AI of, let's see how much of this I included. Here, I'll try to share this just quickly. There's also a lot of hype about, there's a lot of hype about, oh, the AI can do this, the AI can do that. You try to get ChatGPT to help you. You have to see a video now. Yeah. So you ask it about, like what would be needed to take out the nuclear weapons in Iran, and I start getting some information on that. Who's involved in that process? So, to somebody who's, if it's not your field, you can think, oh my goodness, ChatGPT just gave me the plan, and I need 3 aircraft carrier about it, and it's telling me the people. ChatGPT just gave me this whole plan. It's not the whole plan. It's nothing, right? It doesn't mean anything. It would never be used by anybody other than it's a Hollywood script. But it'll spit things out that sound good, that look potentially real, that actually might be somewhat informative. Did I check the, it gave you the nuclear bases. I'm not sure I compared them with the map to be sure it was right, but it spits things out, and you have to double check everything. You can't believe anything it tells you. And, nobody's going to do an op plan based on ChatGPT. I can tell you that much. If you do, it's a sure recipe to lose quickly. It'll look good, and maybe it'll look right. Maybe you can get it formatted super well. And that's the other thing that's very confusing to people about ChatGPT is how good the output can be. It's deceptively, it's deceptive. I found almost every time I use it, I can find errors in what it does. It is not a tool for someone with an analytical role.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the key element here, is that the generative techniques are not, if your role is heavy analysis, guess what? Your job is completely safe. These tools are BS and they'll never match your mind.
That's
If you're,
was exactly what I suspected, but people don't seem to want to listen to me because I'm not a technical expert, but to me it seems to be pretty common sense.
yes. And I have actually, hold on, do I have any more slides here, Irina, just to see if I do? Because there's a, oh, am I still sharing? Let's see here. All right, so we showed you this example. You have the screenshots. I showed you that example. Tim's demo. Oh, we're going the wrong way. Oh, this is what I wanted. Here we go. This is the paper you want to look at, Irina, and I will send you a link, and it's in the popular press. This is importantly from people at the Harvard Business School, Wharton School, MIT Sloan, and BCG. They literally took 800 BCG consultants and did some tests with does ChatGPT help them or not? And this is, I think, a great paper, and is one that people should see. I mean, I'm sorry I don't have more of the guts of the paper to share with you right now, but basically, for the generative creative tasks, AI increased the productivity. If I have to do an ad campaign, or I need images for my whatever, I can generate a rough idea of the image with GPT or the other image tools, hand it off to the professional artist, and they can take it from there. So to increase my productivity, yeah, because now instead of having to go back and forth with them 5 times on how my character has to look, I could do that with GPT or the DALL-E or whatever tool I'm using, and that's what I need. For analytical tasks, it was literally measured in their study, and you can see the study, to decrease productivity. So that's, I think, the endpoint on their study of where we are right now with current GPT. Some people on the pro GPT side would say, "Oh, well, wait till GPT 5, 6, 7, or 8, it'll be fundamentally different," and perhaps not. So, I mean, if your role is analytical, it's very hard to replace that. And in fact, one of the biggest challenges, the article spends most of its time talking about all the challenges of how do you get people and train people to use the unintentional misinformation coming out of ChatGPT. So, it generates something that looks good, sounds like, oh, give me the 5 bullet points I need for, the cumulative rate of inflation for the 20th century. And, it'll give me something. Was it accurate? I don't know. Somebody has to have judgment to know if that's accurate or not, and then check it. So people have to be trained to know the questions they're asking, are they right, and also to double check the GPT in some ways to be sure they work correctly. And that's why, for people that are doing heavy analytical tasks, the chat tools can actually make you less productive, because you're relying on it to do something and you're getting the wrong answer. There's also a loss of training. So tasks that normally you would hand off to a junior person. Oh, can you go out and look at these 5 different tools and pick the best one for our company to use? And so, instead of the junior person going out, learning to do some of that research and applying themselves and evaluating or making a decision matrix or what have you, you decide, oh, it's faster, I'm just going to ask ChatGPT, oh, of these 5 tools, which is the best one? GPT told me this. Okay, boom, I'm done. Well, now your junior employees or junior staff members are not getting the training on doing some of those tasks. Now, did you get the answer faster? Maybe. Was your answer as good? Maybe, maybe not. But you're also losing ability to train people, or people will learn on their own. So there are some challenges for the use of the technology in industry and in the military that these studies are looking at pretty hard right now. And they're doing a fairly good job. I mean, that study was very serious. They had the 3 use cases of no AI with no additional instructions, AI with some training or some little bit of instruction. Interestingly, they found that there's a couple of different categories of users. They sort of segmented them into Borg-like users that live with ChatGPT on the side and are constantly typing at the ChatGPT to get some information and feeding that back in, to other users who are more sort of like the consulting it occasionally. And it's funny they made that comparison. So it splits up with me and some of my colleagues pretty well. One colleague is tremendously into ChatGPT. It's used nonstop because it can be so much faster to, oh gosh, I got to write a note to the garage for, they didn't refund me my money on the payment, blah, blah, blah. Some people like yourself, you're a great writer, right? You write all the time. Some people, that's hard to write an email. And the fact that you can go to a tool and say, oh yeah, ask garage guy, get my money back. And it'll write an email. And if it looks okay for the garage guy, you can paste it. If it's like, make it easy for, garage, it doesn't have to be formal English, and make it straight ahead for the garage team to process, So you can ask it to do things with cultural context that can increase your productivity. So, you can take lawyer speak and turn it into contractor speak. You can do all kinds of things to increase your ability to communicate with a larger audience. So it's good at perhaps at those type of tasks. It's good at summarizing information. It's good at perhaps translating the information from one language into another. Tremendous. That you can get any result, let alone one that's halfway good. I had ChatGPT try to generate some Ossetian for me one time. I never really got a confirmation of how good the Ossetian was, but it was a little bit of Ossetian. So it's good at tasks that it lets you reach out in ways that you may not normally be able to reach out, right? And perhaps that's valuable in some ways, like the ability to communicate with more cultures and with culturally specific context is perhaps very valuable. Again, by the way, because I know this will be a question on your mind, Irina, when I was looking up Ossetian and trying to see, what's a good way to translate something into Ossetian, I was just using ChatGPT. It turns out that the models available for all these Eurasian languages, for most of the Eurasian languages, are all in China. They're all run by Chinese companies. So there's 3 different, Baidu and 2 other Chinese companies have large language models that are built for these Eurasian and South Caucasus and other languages around the world. And I found that very interesting. I said, wow, it looks like the US is not investing in, being a leader in these languages. Now, not because we don't have the skill set, but because, it's not on anybody's mind. So just as we talked today about actions by the Department of Defense and how, these technologies can be applied there, perhaps there's also room at the Department of State, right? So, can we spread our message across the global South in, a very large array of local languages? I mean, right now, we kind of rely on a local embassy to translate into local languages some specific information. It's not the full array of the complete message of what it means to be an American and how great America is today and what we're trying to do for the benefit of the whole world. It's that messaging, American messaging, isn't being spread around the world, and it doesn't happen without some push to do that. So I'm concerned also about that when I saw that, my little effort at Ossetian, for example, that I literally, the Baidu and the other Chinese companies are the ones that have official models for Ossetian. ChatGPT gave me something that I accepted, tried to see if it made sense relative to translate back into Russian. Ossetian has a slightly different Cyrillic alphabet, as you probably know. But anyway, there's that element of this technology too, is, these technologies, I highlighted some potential risks for negative messaging. The same technology could be used for very positive messaging. So you could be used to amplify the truth. It can be used to spread out messages across multiple languages. So it increases my productivity or productivity of a small team massively because I don't have to speak, 3,000 languages, however many languages there are that are extant in the world today. You can deliver messages in individual languages. You can use these tools at times to get some cultural context. It's a little bit hard for the smaller language groups. So anyway, that's where I am. Some prepared remarks at the moment. I think this is, Irina, I'm sorry, this is just simply a gigantic topic with so many aspects to it and so many interesting twists and turns and nooks and crannies that we'll have to come back and cover off some other topics when if you give me some additional questions. But let me know what else you want to talk about.
Well, I think this was an excellent survey overview for most users who are probably overwhelmed and confused by the sheer amount of information on this subject and all the hype and all the warnings about the impending doom of civilization that's coming out of various circles and regulatory frameworks and this and that, which to me sounds a little bit, apocalyptic in a way that's not in line with the current trends. I think we're not nearly at the point where we should even start to panic. But what I do find curious, and I was wondering whether you'd have insight, speaking about this application of these incredible tools in information warfare. I mean, there's a lot that we're hearing about deep fakes and voice cloning and how these can be used to confuse and the adversary, to demoralize them. I am actually not seeing a lot of very sophisticated applications of this or even campaigns. I'm seeing a lot of very amplification of kind of very, very standard talking points, just, by bot accounts and things like that, and sometimes cartoons that are generated as memes, but not a lot of heavy-handed, really creative approach of some of these tools by either side in Russia, Ukraine, for that matter, or any other conflicts. Can you explain why these tools are not being used more and in more creative ways beyond just amplifying or kind of repeating the same sort of things that we're seeing?
Well, that's interesting. I mean, in terms of deep fake technology, why that isn't used more broadly. Perhaps it's simply a little bit more challenging for people to use it. The tools, the GPT tool that I was using here today, it is they put in safeguards to prevent you from using it to generate images of known people, right? So you can't do that with the tool off the shelf. It's more work to generate images without these tools. There's plenty of ways of doing it that people are doing on even laptops, so it doesn't take like a supercomputer or something. But a good question. Why aren't we seeing more deep fakes? I mean, we've seen what's that video game, Arma? We've seen people taking the Arma video game and releasing footage from it as, war footage that fools people for a while. And we've seen a bunch of that. That's not a deep fake. That's just a certain type of a fake. The creativity of the campaigns, that's a good question, right? It takes, because again, there's the generating something and then having the creative angles to do things are two separate tasks, right? You need a great showrunner to have a good reality show, right? These people you don't just put them in a room and stuff happens. People make it happen. And they come up with scenario. So things have to be orchestrated and done. And, as with reality TV, an information campaign, somebody has to be coming up with something and applying it. Now, another area where this technology can be used that I didn't touch on, and, so I'm not quite answering your question why it isn't really used more broadly. Maybe we're not seeing it yet. I mean, I think this year we'll see more. But another application of this technology is that things that traditionally, for another time, maybe we'll talk more about personalized warfare or personalized psyops, that the technology that is used to conduct operations against an individual can be much more automated today. The extent to which you can do individual spear phishing campaigns. So that's a particular type of hacking where it's aimed at a particular individual. So I saw a demonstration, a proof of concept project from some people this summer at DEF CON that were showing that they could take information from the leak that Elon Musk had of 250,000 blue check members' personal information. They could use that data combined with other data, and they could, have a whole automated tool chain generate a campaign against specific individual. So literally, sort of like the tool chain that could, like go through their social media, sort of identify their, what are things this person likes in some sense. I forgot the terminology these guys used for it, and then literally have the thing generate a very specific target for this person. It was fascinating to see. And the idea is that really, with all the data that's being collected and all the data that's being leaked, malevolent actors can take that information and use it. So there will be, things that you would only think would happen to, a high value target. Oh my goodness, you've got to, protect, the head of the DNC has to protect their email carefully. Now all kinds of people can be targeted. It is the range of attack will be much more broad because of the generative technologies combined with the technologies that can analyze all the data that's stolen. So that's really the sort of like one of the big risk factors now is so much personal data is out there. Combined with, in terms of psychological elements here, future psychological warfare can involve campaigns against every TikTok user that grew up on TikTok. So imagine, all that data is in the hands of China. How much of they're keeping, how much of they're analyzing. I don't know. Nobody really knows. But if they were, they would know everything you loved as a child. They would know every song that you liked. They would know every dance move you did. They would know every kind of video you like to watch, all that stuff. And it can have an emotional impact and influence in the future, as we know from simply car commercials, right? They play, the music of your youth is the car commercial music of your middle age. So, there's application of information that can be done much more widely today and targeted much more broadly to all of us who just think, I don't have anything to hide. Well, guess what? You can still become a target. So it's very interesting. I mean, the technology, when I saw what they could do now with, 250,000 people from the Twitter leak, they were able to do something massive compared to, picking one person and manually going through and researching this, researching that. It's combined with other databases. They scrape LinkedIn illegally. Those sources of information are being put together now by, a hacker, semi-malevolent actors, as well as by state actors who can potentially apply it more broadly. In Ukraine, I think that one of the challenges we face, that everybody in the world faces right now, is that applications technology, it takes people. It's not for nothing. It takes people to do some of these things, and we need trained people. So they're trying mightily to downscale the technical overhead to use many of the AI tools. At the same time, TensorFlow, for example, has done a great job of that. They're making the tools very accessible, very usable by people with a wide array of technical skills and even some rudimentary training. And it's the judgment of how you use the tool really that becomes a question. But the mechanics of rolling out some of these AI tools are trying to make it as easy as possible. But we're still, I think, perhaps resource limited. I don't know. We'll talk to some industry people what they have to say. We should check that. But there's not enough people that can do all this work, and also there has to be funding for it. So depending on what the task is, right? Why aren't there more creative campaigns? I mean, I think why aren't there more motion pictures? Why aren't there TV shows about what's going on in Ukraine? Why aren't there all these kind of things? Why isn't there some famous director like John Ford in World War II sent there to make movies? Why not? well, somebody has to pay for it. Somebody has to decide to do it. And you need the creative talent to be put in place to do those type of things. So, I mean, I think that may be part of it. There's a wonderful amount of creativity on the Ukrainian side from, people that some of their music selection is tremendous. By the way, this week I was very entertained by this Russian song "Nogi Nogi" that I hadn't heard before because I don't go to Russian discos, but I've been to Moscow for 8 years. But anyway, you hear these things. Oh, that's pretty funny. It's entertaining. So there's some entertaining people doing things with video, but some of the things you're talking about take a larger scale view, right? You have to have the top level view of what we're trying to accomplish, right? Do we want to be spreading our particular message of what we're doing? Do we want to be, countering a message? Do we want to be delivering a negative message to somebody else? That's something that, I get the feeling the United States is not interested in right now. There's so much concern about, things being identified as misinformation, and concern among people in the conservative media that, if they put out an inaccurate article, it gets labeled as misinformation. And some people say that source is misinformation. Well, I don't know anybody who believes everything they read in the New York Post, for example, but some of the things are true and some of the things are not true. And so there's a challenge in the US politically right now with accepting and funding any kind of information program, messaging programs. We don't have a national program in the United States. Our education system, initiated by President Eisenhower, was actually intended to put us all on a common footing and also to educate people, because honestly, as somebody who's in the military and very committed to integration in the military and opportunities for everybody, President Eisenhower was very concerned about people just simply being ignorant. So we wanted everybody to have an education, and that's why we have a Department of Education today. But that has to put people on a common footing and educate people about media consumption in some way. I'm concerned because right now, the United States is facing larger, China is an ideological enemy, and Russia perhaps is ideological to the extent to which you believe Ruski Mir and the lust for empire is baked in. I don't know where you come down on that, or whether certainly the empire building and the opportunism is part of what they're doing, and the destruction of any kind of large scale legal systems that would slow them down from money laundering and whatever else they try to do financially. We are facing more of an ideological conflict now that takes kind of a more unified messaging to fight it. So, I think we have to evolve what we're doing in the United States with messaging towards something that's shared, reflecting a set of shared values and shared messages that can be impactful around the world. But right now, we're not doing any of that. So the U.S., through manipulation of our enemies, is actually much more isolated today than it was, before October 7th. That's a stunning change from where the U.S. was, where isolation is increasing from around the world. And that's all from messaging from our ideological opponents. So, I think we face big problems, and I'm concerned that we're not addressing them. I'd hope to see better examples out of Poland, by the way, because they're more on the front lines with messaging and dealing with the Russian the Russian threat that is quite near to them. So I hope they can pull through to unify more in terms of their messaging. They have more of a unified, not quite BBC, but along those lines type system. But anyway, those are some of my thoughts, Irina. You've been pretty quiet. I don't know if you're still listening, or
I was
you
just
have other
thinking
things you want to talk about?
I'm just thinking about all the amazing things we could be doing with that information. For instance, designating, creating these individual campaigns to take down individual bad actors. All conflicts could be far less lethal if we could be using these tools preventatively to take down, masterminds of horrific actions before before, you know, they really have a chance to unravel. But we, unfortunately, are allowing our enemies to take the initiative. And quite frankly, after what you told me about this, I mean, I was already aware in general how TikTok data could be abused, but the fact that there are now specific presentations showing how it is, and after that, no action has been taken politically or otherwise to develop defensive scenarios, much less to shut down TikTok. That makes me kind of wonder, with all these technological advances and breakdowns, with the new frontiers and possibilities for winning the conflicts effectively, and I believe US and its allies in free countries have much more of a potential for creativity and creative use of these tools than authoritarian regimes, that we're doing so badly, and our political will is lagging so far behind our capabilities.
Well, it's a challenge partly because democracies are leaky. Uh, they're it's not an autocracy, and it's the Cold War ended when the wall came down, and people have forgotten. They love making all the money, and Cold Wars are expensive wars. They're wars. They take dedicated effort over a long period of time, and guess what? They cost money, and that's really, I think, one of the fundamental challenges is that I think there's still actually, a lot of people walking around who think that the world can just go back to the way it was before, this Russian invasion of Ukraine. It can't. There's people that think they can go back to the business practices they had in the past. They won't be able to. There's going to be more restrictions. There's going to be more eyeballs and automated systems looking at all transactions. And the cost is going to be, the cost is real. It cuts into the growth of your economy. The effort and the focus is what's required. So it's really, I kind of feel right now, Irina, like we're in a period where there's a conflict between the people that want to just keep making as much money as possible, people that care about our democracy, about the world, about the future, and you want a better future, you want a better world, and they're willing to work for it, and make sacrifices for democracy, and then people who don't know and get misled in one way or another. I mean, so we've got kind of a lot going on in the United States right now, and I think that same around the world, and these financial interests are very powerful, and they can roll out these resources. In fact, they bought a social media platform. They bought Elon Musk and his allies, who are very much in the camp of anarcho-capitalism, for example, or extreme libertarianism, or whatever you want to categorize it. They own a social media platform now. They control what happens with all that data. Gosh, it's too bad he leaked 250,000 people. I don't know how that could have happened, but it did. Are there going to be more leaks? Is he going to sell data? What is he going to do with the information? And how can that information be used by others? So it's a real challenge of us as a society deciding what does it mean to have a democracy, and do we really want to preserve it? And we're willing to do more to make that happen. So
yes, and well,
there's
all of these things could be going both ways, though. We are not, Russia and China and Iran are not the only ones who can amplify propaganda or hack people. We have the tools to be used against, effectively, and we know how to use them very effectively when we want to. But all of this seems to be due to very poor allocation of resources and priorities, and just plain fear of having, having to make decisions, and having to make decisions that are not, not, may not be sound in good taste for peacetime, but we're not in peacetime. And this is what people don't understand. Just because we don't have a war on our territory in terms of physical confrontations with the with the British or Chinese or Russians or Nazis, communists, or whoever, doesn't mean that we're not in a state of that we're in a state of peace. We're not. We have a
it's truly amazing. I mean, you can't go on social media without seeing it, and without seeing the fact that we're in the middle of an information war, and the United States is getting hit nonstop by this stuff, and with at a national level or state level, our governments are not are not doing anything offensive about it, as far as I know. Maybe they are, that I don't know.
Very
But
rarely,
there's
and mostly in terms of cyber strikes and things of that nature, just, hacking this or that thing, enemy target occasional, but not broad information campaigns other than just general, propaganda. We are not, for instance, hacking into Russian TV stations and taking over with the messaging and telling people, this is the accurate information and this is what they've been lying to you and here's the proof. We could be doing that and it could be very effective, but we're not.
all kinds of things we could be doing there. And then, I mean, perhaps a better angle to look at it in terms of beginning to develop the skill sets and the systems to do it is to look at it on a positive angle, like a positive messaging in other areas, right? Not even in conflict areas, or regimes that are hateful towards us. But there seems to be no deterrence to the information warfare that's waged against us, and that's distressing. The abilities of us to defend ourselves are limited. The system in the United States it's a litigious system, where this is not as much a regulatory state as the European capitalism is. But we're not imposing costs on our corporations to better protect our information, right? What's the cost to a social media company, Twitter, for losing 250,000 users' data? Now what was lost? What's involved in data? If there was a fine that was substantial, if it was $1,000 fine per user for losing your data, the $250 million fine. If you lose PII data, the person's phone number, something else is very, detailed information. Twitter scans driver's licenses now. Imagine there 250,000 of those. Maybe that's a $10,000 fine. Would imposing a steeper cost on our corporations that may get leaks lead them to spending more money on cyber defenses? Because right now, it's a corporate cost on a corporate line item cost. The blue team is expensive, is an expense.
Mm-hmm.
What do we got to pay these people for? So, how much are they going to spend on it? They're going to limit that budget within something that's basically within the limit of what they think they can get sued by and how much their insurance covers. It's the amount of money that will be spent on cyber defense within U.S. corporations, right? So the only way to increase cyber defense is to impose higher costs with regulation. If that's possible, and or also to have the government more involved in, policing and catching people that are committing these acts, finding them.
Sure.
And if they're coming from foreign countries, doing more about it. So that's the other challenge is, my personal feeling is that, it's insane that, we have all these cyber attacks coming out of Russia. Why did I have to spend time explaining to my grandmother how to clean the viruses off of her computer that, some, Russian hackers tried to put on there from whatever coupon website she clicked on? Why did I have to spend my time doing that, right? And they can sit there in Russia and do this nonstop at us and be considered computer scientists. It's ridiculous. So,
Mm-hmm.
I certainly am in favor of doing more. When I've tried to ask government officials about it, the answer is really, well, it's non-kinetic. It doesn't really hurt us, right? So it's a cost of transaction. It's a cost of time in your daily life. It's not it didn't blow up something. So all these cyber actions don't hurt us that way. The information warfare aspects are hurting us, though, in terms of making our society more polarized. So that's where I think there needs to be much more that's done to unify rather than polarize so strongly right now. And that's probably takes greater cooperation with social media companies, or even greater regulation of social media companies in some fashion to require that. Because right now, the bad behavior is all that gets rewarded. So there's a strong incentive to, be an extremist online. And then, of course, that flows in with information sources from overseas. And here we are. So here we are in 2024. I feel like we're in the middle of an information war with a lot of incoming on us, but that's where we are, I don't know what else to tell you.
You know,
I don't know if this is good.
You
Yeah,
know, we have a potential. What you're telling me though from all of this, we have, you know, information warfare nukes on our hands, and we are fighting with butter knives.
um, oh, you mean, well, it depends on how much we can do, right? It's there's always so much the US can do within certain realms.
The US
But yeah, we
government,
have
sure, it's got legal and you know, international limitations, but there's a good deal of private sector that works in semi-formal capacity on various projects, and they could be, you know, employed to do a lot more. But I am seeing a complete disinterest from government structures to engage even with private
correct.
actors
They
for that
will.
purpose.
I've been told by one of these companies they won't do anything unless it's approved by a three-letter agency, right? It
Ugh.
has to be approved by a U.S. government agency for them to do anything,
Who themselves are
and
over lawyered, sadly. You know, it's one thing to
yeah,
do, you know, to avoid, you know, try to avoid casualties and employ the, you know, the legal bureaucracy to prevent, you know, but you know, if you are not going to be involved in non-lethal sort of things, then what are you doing? Why are you even there?
yeah. It's a challenge. It's a challenge. I mean, I think you discussed it actually when you were at the New York Bar Association and had the presentations about what would happen, and there was the quote from the Roman general about in times of war the law goes away that one of the lawyers knew the Latin for. Yeah, people could do things in time of war that may violate certain U.S. regulations or laws, but would not be ever looked into. Um, but people are rightly concerned about that. There's no letters of marque in the current age. Is the U.S. Revolutionary Navy was most underpowered, relying almost exclusively on the French, but they did have they did have concerned citizens who were issued letters of marque that authorized them to take action against British shipping. So these were letters from the U.S. Congress saying you're authorized to do these actions that might otherwise could be considered illegal, unethical, or acts of piracy. But in this case, you're doing it for us, so go right ahead. So that was done at that particular point in time. I'm not sure that our current, leadership in the United States on all sides of the aisles, the whole spectrum, understand really the scale that these cyber operations and information warfare against the United States can take and how quickly they can unfold. So, I know we don't want to get into the details of the, Hamas attacks and terrorism and the response, but just on TikTok, the few stats that were available, because actually TikTok makes it very difficult for people to do research on its platform, showed that there were, in a short period of time, there were 3 billion pro-Hamas hashtags, and there were, millions of pro-Israel responses. But you're outnumbered by, you're dealing with billions, literally billions of hashtags. So
Which
that
just,
is,
you know, which just
yeah.
gives incentive to try to limit the reach of this platform as much as possible. And you know, if your adversary has a particular tool that is being deliberately misused in a way that cannot have a possible most has a very clear negative use and is being weaponized, why would you not try to limit the reach of that weapon? If you're going to
Oh,
try to stop, Iran from having ballistic missiles, why would you at least not have TikTok, made unavailable in your country? This at the very least.
yes. I mean, I believe there's one congressman or senator, I forget whose name it is, who's a stock owner in TikTok. So there's a few politicians that have a financial interest that literally are blocking somebody, I think in the Senate, blocking the actions against TikTok, because as you know, there's a number of senators, I believe Rubio and others, that are, firmly against it, and applaud them for that. Yeah, there's people that have a financial interest. It's ridiculous. I mean, it should be very simple. I mean, the other countries don't put up with this. The minute the U.S. tried to have social networks in, Russia, China, wherever, Russia has the Contact. They don't have, they have Facebook there too, but most people use VK. And then, China just basically gets rid of any U.S. software and says, okay, there has to be a Chinese company, and we accept that. Why on earth are we not, to simply, the core idea and the core user interface is not patentable for TikTok. The development cost to create a first pass clone is probably low millions of dollars. Then it requires financial backing and a whole bunch of other things. I'm not sure if they're even profitable, by the way. But so why not just say we can't have this company foreign owned? Boom, it's gone. There has to be a U.S. company here. Somebody fund a U.S. company. There you go. Start it up. We have a U.S. company to do that. That's what it should be. There should also be a requirement for any senators ever happen to hear this, by the way, that all these social media platforms permit research and have tools and functionality to permit archiving and research by independent third parties that can analyze the platform and what's going on, check for misinformation, check for other things. I know those tools is a two-handed sword that can be misused, but right now, literally, researchers are blind to what's going on TikTok. Nobody is sitting there analyzing it that I know about. I hope, in my mind, I hope that somebody's invested some serious money in trying to scrape everything off of TikTok and to keep it for analysis and to figure out what's happening. But I don't know if anybody has for a fact. Same with the new Twitter now with Musk's Twitter. It's difficult for anybody to do research. It's expensive for non-academic institutions. It's even difficult and expensive for academic institutions. So there's real limits on what can be done to even understand the messaging. So Irina, perhaps to circle this back to where we were before, it's even worse because not only are we in the middle of an information war, we've reduced our ability to observe the information that's going by us and to all the people in the United States. So we have limited views on what people are seeing. And that's, again, something that's very different in this era. And I think we're drifting pretty far away from AI. Maybe we'll edit this out and do a different conversation on this. But we're getting pretty far away from AI now because it is, it's how do you, I think our leadership on all sides of all aisles here are still in the TV news, cable news, newspaper world, right? And they don't understand that, what's the stats now? 50% of people under 45 get their info from social media, get their news information from social media.
And even, by the way, conventional newspapers have been weaponized. I can tell you, reading articles, I see campaigns right there, and I can see when a specific reporter is regurgitating talking points from a particular source, whether it's U.S. government or foreign government or some private entity, It's, if you know how to read the news, you'll be able to tell quickly enough how much of it is straight reporting and how much of it is being fed into the news stream, and that makes it not reliable information.
Yeah, and then you can tell also, there's so much you can get if you study it, like who's, like when the news story broke about Secretary Austin that Saturday, and if you notice, Axios was very slow to cover the story because one of the key executives at Axios is actually married to the third or fourth person in line on the civilian side of the Department of Defense. So there's relationships, there's relationships and associations, and they did cover it eventually. But there's relationships, associations, there's friends and family out there. There's all kinds of things that have an effect on the information we receive, and we don't have. It's so funny. I began my life in media, amazed at how similar the news sources were on CBS, ABC, and NBC. When I was in college, I would flip the dial back and forth if I could between the different channels to see, to try to catch the nightly half hour of news. And sometimes McNeil News Hour. This was PBS show that used to be on the air back in the day. And I was always amazed by how similar the sequence of stories were. What was considered important to be covered, what was national news, what was international news that warranted coverage. It was very interesting to me to see how similar things were. And today we've entered, you know, a very different world where things are just, you know, completely divergent, other than the extent to which they're all talking about a particular political figure all the time, you know, named Donald Trump. It's unbelievable. Anyway, soaking up all the oxygen and not talking about important issues. But anyway, Irina, we can't solve all the problems of one convo.
Absolutely, but this was a great overview. It was a great insight because I think a lot of the times people don't even know what tools are available, how they can be used, and when we see what happens in a conflict, we take it for granted that, you know, oh well, some people do something, to quote to quote an infamous member of U.S. Congress. They don't see the work and the tools and how the conflict is won and what it takes, and we certainly don't appreciate how these tools make change the landscape of the conflicts, sometimes in our favor. You know, being at the forefront of, you know, it makes our work a great investment. This is not just randomly people trying to kill each other. We're not just funding endless wars for the sake of benefiting some nefarious entities. We are actually, in some ways, by testing out these tools in other conflicts, are actually ensuring our own self-defense and our own capabilities. And I think this is something that people don't quite get. And I hope after hearing this, after hearing how the investment in these innovative technologies can lead to important breakthroughs, and it's better to test them in battle with other people than with us, they will come to appreciate the value of this. Because we are,
Yep.
you know, all the data is showing that on many fronts we are lagging behind, and I'm not just talking information warfare. We're talking about the Navy. We are talking about having to bring back people from retiring to just to redesign certain types of conventional weapons. So all of that is showing that we should be investing more rather than less, and reaping maximizing the benefits, you know, before it's too late and before we have to do it in an emergency setting. Look what happened with COVID. We were caught with our pants down because we did not have access to, you know, the types of equipment we needed. It was either outsourced or simply not being developed in sufficient quantities. We want to avoid that level of unpreparedness for any sort of confrontation.
It's something that, I mean, literally is not in the American dialogue at all right now, the idea of being prepared for conflict. It's not something that is part of any kind of messaging, you know, like the back in the day, I watched this, you know, Clint Eastwood movie, and I was thinking the idea that, like, oh, the cowboy movies deliver the message of the, well, there needs to be a sheriff, or there needs to be somebody to police and protect things, and if you don't have that, these bad people come in and do all kinds of stuff, you know. I don't know what the messaging of our entertainment is today. You know, you know, everybody's different and has their magical superpowers that help you, you know, save the universe and be famous. I don't know. I don't know if there's a message there or not. I mean, I think that really on the communication sides, the United States needs a great deal more of national messaging. There's a wonderful, it's wonderful propaganda. There's this Turkish, I was going to say, that wonderful show. It's an entertaining show, Turkish show, Ertuğrul, Ertuğrul. I don't speak Turkish. I don't know. It's called Ertuğrul Resurrection. It was on Netflix. It's a 5-season renaissance of Turkish. It's, you know, a faux history of the grandfather of Osman, the founder of the dynasty. It's a very, I found it a very interesting show on some of the episodes I watched, because I love the idea. I loved how effective it was at delivering a message that you have to have a strong leader that people should trust, but various people don't trust for whatever mistaken reasons. And they've got to fight off the Crusaders, and they've got to fight off the Mongols. And oh, there's one good Armenian. They're nice to the one good Armenian. He's a good man, you know. But it's interesting to see kind of the entertainment in other cultures, and to see this is very effective at delivering a message of unify behind a strong leader. And that show came out in 2013 or 14 or so. Was extremely popular when, as Erdogan was cementing his power with changing the constitution in Turkey and changing how things work. So it's very interesting to me. I thought that I don't know anybody who's done like an analysis of Turkish propaganda literature, but I found that to be just a wonderful example that I wish we had something like that in the United States that delivered some kind of positive unifying message about being calm enough to have a rational conversation and solve our problems in a way that supports all of our values, kind of a thing. I mean, we need something today that I think the United States is missing in terms of messaging like that, or some storyline or show. I'm completely flummoxed and stunned by the fact that there are not more shows about the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I don't know what these freaking Hollywood writers are doing. They're just using ChatGPT. Now they have a new contract and they don't get squeezed out. I don't know what they're doing, because I mean, there's a story on every corner, every hour. It's unbelievable what's happening there now. And I'm stunned that it's not, part of American messaging, or even,
Well, I hate to say
part
it,
of,
but Chinese money in Hollywood may be part of the problem. But
yep,
yes,
they
but given that hopefully the important first step of trying to overcome problem is to be aware that exists. I think what we talked about today highlights the tools and what they are, and kind of puts aside response to some very common questions and confusion, what can and cannot happen. And hopefully, I think it will leave people thinking about all these wonderful possibilities that are out there, and that we could use them in different ways and effectively, and we don't have to be bogged down. Oh well, those our enemies are winning and everything is hopeless. It's not. We have a lot of things that we can work with, and we can do things
we
that
can do a lot.
we could do things to make them less costly to ourselves and our allies. We can do things. We don't have to be stuck in a dichotomy of, it's either all or nothing. It's either, we give up, or, and the enemy wins, or, they kill us and, destroy our homes. No, we want to be out there affirmatively and taking measures, even non-lethal measures, to prevent them from happening. And we have this incredible talent, these incredible tools that can aid us effectively if we just allow ourselves to get ourselves out of this bogged down mess and take a look very optimistically at what's out there and what we can do with it.
Yeah. Well, Irina, hey, it's a lot of fun talking to you. I mean, we don't just talk very often. Hey, are we still recording?
Yeah, I'm just finishing that now with my comments. Thank you for everyone who's watched this conversation. I know there's a lot of information to parse through, but I do think it's important to consider all these things. And we'll be exploring many of these topics in the future in more detail, for sure, as the field evolves and they use in conflict zones and in geopolitics in general, and security also becomes more prominent, as Greg suggested. And Greg, thank you so much for joining us and giving us so much of your time. For those watching, we'll be back, of course, next Tuesday night at 9 p.m. as usual. Thank you so much for joining, and have a great night.
Thank you very much, Irina. It's been a real pleasure.